We're having some technical difficulties.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Is it working now? Good? Okay. I'm going to start over because of.
Note he didn't hear a call to order or anything.
Oh,
So I don't know
from
about that.
from the beginning there was a technical.
You guys can.
Cammy, do I need to restate all that?
Yeah, I think you're gonna have to for the record for people to see. I mean, you can just summarize what was done. And
Okay, I'll do that.
The votes and have to do.
All right. Okay. This is David Culpepper, the chairman of the Virginia Beach City Public Schools Audit Committee. I'm going to briefly summarize what has already occurred for the sake of the recording. The meeting was called to order at 1:26. We then made one modification to the agenda and adopted the agenda as modified. That was moved by Mr. Cummings and seconded by Mr. Davenport, and was unanimously adopted. Bless you. We then approved the regular meeting minutes from the January 14th committee meeting of the Audit Committee. That was motioned by Mr. Cummings and seconded by Mr. Davenport, and unanimously approved. We are now on to item B in the agenda, which is completed reports. And I turn it over to our auditor.
Mr. Culpepper, I just want to note that you also amended the agenda under section C to add a fourth investigation. Investigation number 2691 was added under section C.
Correct. Yes,
Fourth.
that's the amendment. Yes, thank you for stating that clearly. All right, now I'll turn it back over to our auditor to go through the completed reports.
Okay, thank you. We're going to begin this afternoon with our 4 school activity funds audits. We completed follow-up audits at 3 schools and a change in principal at 1. All follow-up audits evaluated the first 6 months of activity at the school, and the change in principal was performed through January 31st of this year. Our conclusion for all 4 audits is that the financial statement for each school was fairly stated. The financial statement is shown in the appendix in each report. I will provide highlights of the work performed at each school and will be happy to answer any questions. The first was the follow-up at Green Run High School. We noted one exception related to receipts for the coffee shop. This is explained on page 4. We noted improvement from the prior year's audit, the findings from that audit for account monitoring and procedures related to cash disbursements. Are there any questions on Green Run High?
Just one.
Okay.
Probably more of a comment than a question. More money is rare and a good thing. So I take it from that, other than a procedural error here, you didn't find likelihood of any fraud?
Well, it's not fraud, but what was happening was they were not accurately recording the daily sales, which is why there was more in that change fund than that there should have been. They should be reconciling that after each day of sales and then turning it in. So it should stay at 100.
Correct. Okay.
Okay?
Thank you. Any other questions on this report?
Okay. All right, moving on to the next follow-up. That was Cox High School. We noted 2 cash disbursement exceptions, one payment that was made based on an email request, and a second disbursement that was paid from an incorrect account. Both of these are explained on page 4. We also had one late deposit, which is explained on page 5. For this school, we noted improvement from the previous findings for a check reissuance, account monitoring, missing procurement, and an incorrect transfer.
I'll give everybody a second to review that.
Any questions for Cox High School?
Do you have any questions?
So with not getting the invoice prior, I mean, that's standard
Standard.
protocol.
Yes.
Is it when this happens, is it a time restraint issue where they're trying to get something quicker? Or?
It was in this case, it was for athletic trainers, and what happened was the student activity coordinator sent an email to the bookkeeper saying we need to pay the vendor. And instead of waiting for the invoice,
Yeah.
the bookkeeper cut the check, and then ultimately what should have happened is there should have been follow-up for the invoice. But ideally, we don't want to pay from an email because it could be the wrong amount. So the invoice is standard
Right,
protocol.
and that's obviously in the training, and everyone
Yes.
knows that, and it's repeated over and over again.
Yeah,
I'm
and
sure.
this is a tenured bookkeeper.
Okay.
But we do have a brand new principal at the school. So
Okay.
this was, timing wise, it was very good because, we looked at the first 6 months of activity, which was the first 6 months of the new principal being there. So the timing is good.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Okay, any other questions?
Okay. All right. The final follow-up audit was at Renaissance Academy. For this particular one, we didn't have any exceptions. We did note improvement on the previous audit, which we had problems related to cash receipts, a cash disbursement, and missing procurement. So there was 100% improvement across the board and no findings noted.
Excellent. I don't think that alleviates any questions, but I'll ask. Any questions?
Any questions?
All right.
Okay. And the final school activity funds audit was a change in principal, which, as a reminder, that's required by our charter that we evaluate the school anytime there's a change in bookkeeper or change in principal. This one was again done through the end of January, which was timing of the principal's departure. We noted one exception for improper account coding, and that's explained on page 4. And in the previous year, there were no findings, but basically what this audit does is it separates the work of the previous principal from the new principal. So it gives a clean cutoff for the incoming principal.
That was just incorrect
Yeah, so if you look at page 4, one procurement, we looked at 13 transactions and one of them was incorrectly coded. It looks like we charged flag football equipment to the Taekwondo account. So really, it was really just the wrong activity. And so the problem with that is if the sponsor is looking for the money to spend it and it's not in their account, that's why it's important for sponsors to review their activity. And it just happened to be one of our selections.
Okay, yeah, that's actually, I was just gonna ask a process question
Yeah.
related to that. So when you find one, you just take 13 transactions to look at them, you find an error with one. Does that draw you to look at more, or when would it draw you to look for more?
It would if we saw a pattern of continual problem, we would expand the sample. But for a one-off like this, we wouldn't, because we not only look at several months of P-card transactions, but we also pick additional cash disbursements. So if we saw a trend, then we would expand it. A good example of that was several years back, we saw a problem with issuing refunds without backup. And so we moved after that to test all refunds until we saw improvement across the board, and then we slack off on that. So it's really based on what we see at that particular school. And because this was a standalone audit, we do have to do more work
Okay,
than we do versus the year end.
yeah, I understand. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So the next item completed is the continuous auditing project for pre-trip bus inspections. The objective of this non-audit service was to determine through on-site observation if VBCPS is following the state code requirements for bus drivers to do an inspection of the bus each day before the first pickup. This includes inspecting the perimeter of the bus, testing the bus's stop arm function and lights, and doing an under-the-hood inspection. In this project, we observed 11 buses that had not been previously observed. 6 drivers, and the results of that were 6 drivers performed all 3 pre-trip bus inspection procedures. 4 drivers did not complete the under-the-hood inspection, and one driver did not inspect the perimeter or under the hood. We noted improvement from the previous pre-trip bus inspection project, which was completed in 2024. Because this is not a full audit, it is a non-audit service, we don't require a response from management. We just present the information that we have collected. The information was provided to the Office of Transportation Services for follow-up and training.
Okay, I didn't have that previous audit to review, but my recollection of it is that it was somewhat, shocking is probably overstating, but I was surprised at the shortcomings in inspection. So this appears to be a pretty significant improvement.
Yes, it
even though the
wasn't.
sample size is small.
Yes, it was an improvement. In 2024, just for reference, 50% completed the entire inspection, 39% completed part of the inspection, and 11% did not do the inspection at all. So we definitely saw improvement, because if you look at the statistics from these results, 55% completed all inspections and 45% completed partial. So there's definitely an improvement.
Okay. And room to grow. Go ahead.
How often do we do these? Is it every year and a half to 2 years? or-
Well, so historically, we presented the, in 2023, we did a full bus maintenance audit. And this was one of the findings of that particular audit. So as a follow-up to that, in June of 2024, we did another observation. As resulting in that, we had some area to improve, so we put it on our schedule to do 2 years later.
And then do you foresee that you're gonna do it again in a couple of years, or?
I think that is one of the thoughts. At one point, we were under the assumption that we might be able to, management would be able to see the perimeter inspection with the new stop arm cameras. But unfortunately, that's not the case. They're not able to see that, so therefore our observation. But I believe that transportation does their own visits as well, and we do have some members of transportation here with us. JT, would you like to comment on that?
Yes.
Do you want to? Yes, it's working.
One question I have that you can answer while you're talking to is,
Yeah.
do you share the summary of your audits of the same process with the auditor?
We haven't yet, is this on?
You got to press the. There you go.
Sorry about that, good afternoon. We haven't, from this year, we began this year as a goal, department goal, to have area supervisors go out and observe drivers doing pre-trips. To be honest with you, at the beginning of the year, it was a little bit hard for them to do that since we were implementing the new routing software and stop arm cameras. But since then, we've been picking up steam. We have supervisors going out visually observing drivers doing their pre-trips. Those who don't complete a pre-trip, it is documented and they receive a letter. And we will continue to advance disciplinary action should they continue to fail to do the proper pre-trip.
All right, Ms. Williams, you still have the floor.
I was just wondering and kind of hoping that we would do it again, because even though there's improvement, 50 to 55%, we can still.
Well, and we have a lot of school buses on the road, so,
Right.
So we can, and we definitely look at the ones that we looked at previously. We aren't able to track by driver, but we are able to track by bus number. And so what we have done over the 3 different observations that we've done so far is we do a different geographic area.
Okay, and do we have approximately 700 buses on the road a day?
No, ma'am, we have about 555 buses
Okay,
on a day where we have all drivers, all hands on deck. So it's about 550 daily.
okay,
And it is complicated to get out because we don't have central parking lots. They're
Right.
parked over the city, people's homes, people's schools, at schools, that kind of thing.
yeah, that's a lot of buses.
Yep. You're welcome.
All right,
Any more questions?
Go ahead, Larry.
So they're not all parked in one location.
Correct.
And if they're in front of someone's home, I guess it's just impractical to be checking that.
We do include those.
Yes.
We get
Okay.
a report from transportation of the location of the buses and the last on and off. And so that gives us the ability to plan so that we can be in that neighborhood to watch what's happening.
Yep.
So we definitely We don't just look at the centralized places.
Okay. When they check under the hood, what are they looking for?
Pretty much everything and anything. Loose belts, leaks, anything that's out of order.
Okay.
Yeah. I think early on, several years ago, when the audit was conducted, there was some confusion because the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration during the COVID period, they allowed states to exclude pre-trips for certain categories of vehicles. And there is a push at the national level to exempt school buses because unlike other commercial vehicles, school buses are rotated through our shop every 45 days. Unlike, say, a semi that's going cross-country, our shop staff is doing a complete inspection of the bus, more so than what you would have for your annual car inspection. So we feel our buses are safe. We just want to see our numbers increase for people conducting the proper pre-trips until the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration changes something there.
I guess just to follow up on, what someone's looking at under the hood, can you just walk me through what all at a high level, obviously not nuts and bolts, but at a high level, what does the inspection entail and how long does it approximately take each driver?
Well, it depends on a lot of variables as to how long it takes. I could do a pre-trip probably in 10 minutes, complete pre-trip. You're checking everything. You're checking lights, like I said, belts. You're looking at the steering box to make sure there's nothing loose with the steering. Tires, lug nuts, exhaust systems, lettering on the bus, front to back, interior, loose seats, the whole bus.
So are they expected, I'm just trying to understand. So
Sure.
like you mentioned lug nuts, are they taking a little wrench around and
No, because on our
Interior, just like
buses, we have, I don't know
touch
if you've ever seen the fluorescent, like teardrop
yeah.
plastic things. They will indicate whether that lug nut is loose or not. If you don't have them, you are expected to see if they're loose. And believe it or not, they do come loose on buses. So we added the safety feature of having these fluorescent, they're usually lime green or bright orange on each lug nut. So if it's turned in the opposite direction, you know it's loose.
And so I was looking up the administrative code that's referenced in this report. And it says the inspection shall be recorded in a format approved by the DOE. What's that format look like for us?
Okay, so for us, because we're a little bit advanced from other school divisions in the Commonwealth, typically people use paper pre-trip forms, and it's for the month. And then at the end of the month, they submit them to the office and filed for audit by the state or the Department of Transportation. So we are using the new technology on the tablets. Drivers can go in and check that they've covered these items. And that is acceptable by the state.
So there's a software solution that goes somewhere, and so we just could probably see real-time analytics of who's filling stuff out and whatnot, I assume.
Yes. But with that, there were workarounds because you could go in and click that you checked everything. So that's why we're doing visual inspections as well as trying to use a camera system to check as well.
Appreciate that. I think I learned something new every day on school board and audit committees and whatnot. So I appreciate you sharing that information.
Sure. Anybody else?
Yeah, what you just said, actually, I didn't know that they were required to make a record, so that ups the ante of not doing the inspection, because now they've created a falsified record of something they didn't do.
Exactly.
That's significant.
Yep.
I assume you addressed that in the letter you send them?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm a pilot, so I consider pre-flight a pretty important thing.
I agree with you.
We consider that.
Yeah.
And it might not be mechanical. It could be graffiti that we don't want the public seeing as it's going down Virginia Beach Boulevard. So
Kind of like you say, I'll walk around the airplane. I'll walk around an airplane that I'm not qualified to fix all the time. And what am I looking for? Well, I mean, you kind of said it, and it sounds simple, but when you drive a bus every day, you know when something doesn't look right.
exactly.
I've looked at the same bus 1,000 times, and if something's not right, I'll see it.
Right.
And I imagine your checklist does have some detail, and when you teach them, you do give them detail. I mean, look for this, look for that. You mentioned the fluorescent on the paint lug nuts, or excuse me, the paint on the lug nuts. Let you know if they're loose. But anyway, in any case, So I come at this discussion from that perspective that I do like that there's improvement, but the right answer is 100%. I appreciate that you're taking it seriously and doing this internally.
Most definitely.
The auditors do a great job, but they're really primarily there to address shortcomings in procedure, and you're addressing those procedures to ensure that the improvements actually occur. I appreciate that.
Yes, sir. It's all about student safety.
Yes, sir. Any other questions? Thanks, sir. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
So just for reference, that initial audit was issued in April of 2023, if you all would want to read it, because several of the things that Mr. Lash addressed, we discussed in that audit. So if you're interested in some reading, April of 2023, it's on the website.
Thank you.
Okay, the next completed report was the Ventilation Improvement Projects Grant Audit. We performed a compliance audit for the grant awarded to VBCPS for just over $13 million to complete ventilation replacement and improvement projects in schools. The grant funds were passed through from the federal government to the state and awarded by VDOE to VBCPS, requiring a 100% local match of funds. The grant expenditures had to follow certain regulations, and if you look at page 2, the first objective, you'll see that all of the expenditures had to be for approved HVAC systems. 100% of the local match had to be spent. The expenditures had to be encumbered by 7/1 of 24, and all expenditures for this grant have to be expended by December 31st of this year. To satisfy the procurement requirements, the contracted vendors could not be suspended or debarred, and the amount of the federal funding was required to be disclosed in all public bid announcements. We determined that all expenditures for the grant and the local match were allowable. There's a total of $220,375.99 that was encumbered by 7/1/24, which was the deadline, which need to be spent by 12/31 of 26. These expenditures are being retained for improvements at Lansdowne High School, which are awaiting commissioning. In addition, VBCPS met the local match spending requirement. All reimbursements due to VBCPS were received or awaiting reimbursement, including one payment that was received outside the audit period. None of the vendors used in the projects were listed as debarred or suspended. There were a total of 4 vendors. And the schools that the work was done on are listed on page 2 under results. We did work at 2 elementary, 1 middle, and 3 high schools. However, the one item that we did note that was incorrect in the audit was that the advertisement for bid posted in Demand Star for each of the 7 schools did not disclose that the planned improvements were being funded with federal grant and matching funds. And we'll discuss that in finding number 1. For objective number 2, we evaluated if all transactions were processed according to VBCPS procedures, and these are listed in objective number 2, and that's on page 3. Under the methodology, there were no exceptions related to these requirements. We have 1 finding and 1 suggestion for improvement. The finding, which is on page 5, is related to the federal funding disclosure. Our recommendation is for the Office of Procurement Services to be involved in the procurement related to construction and improvement projects, and for the resulting plan to be in policy as needed. So at this particular time, the Office of Procurement Services is not ultimately responsible for procurement for capital improvement projects. That's written in school board policy. So our suggestion is that procurement be involved, because if they had been involved in this particular procurement, they are aware of those federal funding disclosure requirements. And finally, on page 6, we have 1 suggestion for improvement. We found that the expenditures for the local match were not recorded with the grant. They were recorded in the capital improvement fund in the HVAC improvement project. That's not incorrect, which is why we have it listed as another items noted. However, because at some point in time, we may be required to provide the expenditures, a summary of expenditures, it's difficult to locate those expenditures within the big CIP project. We were able to identify them and trace them, but our recommendation is for management to identify those expenditures so that future tracing and potential audits, those expenditures will be able to be traced. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
So this might be a Cammy question. So, the recommendation is to make sure we probably need to update policy. Do you concur with that?
Yeah, and I was gonna say, I know that procurement is working with facilities, and Liz, I thought, Alicia sent something out that they would be taking over your procurement. So I know they're already working towards them. You saw it on design build, they were
Right.
very closely working together to learn it. So my understanding was it was gonna be coming back under procurement.
Yes, that's correct. So we actually spoke as late as today. So there's several policies that we're taking a look at. We'll be working with the chief financial officer and the chief operations officer as well as we look at those policies just to see where we can get procurement to assist a little bit more. We've been doing a great job with the Princess Anne High School design build process and working together collaboratively just to make sure all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. So we're looking forward to updating any policies that might need to be updated.
Okay, because I know when we interviewed with you, Karen, several of us wanted to look at the procurement and all this, especially with the Princess Anne.
Yeah,
Right-
and
right
we've
down
talked
the
about
road.
it being a phased approach as well.
Right.
You know, not being able to just do it right away, but we're in conversation all the time though as well. They're our fast friends, so.
I will say with design build, because I've had the opportunity to participate with them, Ms. Unger brought in a specialist and did a training for us. Procurement sat in with us. Her team sat in with us. I was able to sit in with us. So it's a really nice collaboration on a new concept that we're working with. And we've been working very closely with procurement on Princess Anne High School as we're all learning this process. So I think this will be a nice transition. We'll just have to get the policies up and consistent when they're ready to fully transition over.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Brown?
Yeah, I just have a suggestion and a comment. When that comes forward to policy, I think it would be appropriate if you're there as well as you all, so that
Absolutely.
the policy committee is able to move forward, make sure everything looks good.
And I think management has already circulated that policy within, amongst the departments, so we're more than happy to participate, absolutely.
So I just want to clarify one thing. So you have your finding and your item.
Yes.
Are those both related to the same policy adjustments?
No.
So
So the item noted is really more of a tracing and tracking. It's more of a recommendation because what they did was not necessarily wrong, but it took some time for us to unwind because that capital project has all of the HVAC improvement expenditures in it. So we had to trace, just those 7 schools. We had to trace those expenditures, and they set up a code to identify them, but they didn't use the code for all expenditures. So
Okay. I think that
basically,
driving at.
so basically 1/3 of them in the capital improvements fund, and again, these are the match requirements, were coded to a specific activity code that points to this grant, but the other 2/3 were not. So our recommendation is that management figure out a way, whether it's recoding the transactions, or I think what management had kind of indicated to us was they would do kind of a note to file using possibly the spreadsheet that internal audit has already developed to identify those expenditures. And then that way, if at some point those expenditures are pulled for single audit, that they will be clearly identifiable.
Okay.
And I just want to make the point, so that's from the coding she's mentioning that happened as this was a several-year process for the grant funding, and projects kept changing. There were certain thresholds and things like that. So collaborating with business services is where we saw, okay, let's start adding codes to things. So continuous improvement as we were going through. So appreciate Audit pointing that out.
Well, having dealt with funding codes, in the past, sometimes, you're looking at this long list of codes, like which one do I pick? Oh, that one.
Yes, yeah, and so
So part
created.
of this is awareness, right?
It was creating an additional code to the code that already exists to make sure we're identifying as the local match to the grant funding match. And we had set that up during the process, and the ones that were missed were very early on in the process. Yes.
All right.
Great, thank you.
That's all I got. Any other questions? Go ahead, Mr. Davenport.
Why is it required to note the grant proceeds and the bid?
It's a federal
Yeah.
requirement, for all federally funded projects, that you have to disclose either the amount or the percentage that's gonna be federally funded.
So it's just a federal requirement?
It is.
They want their credit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, good.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So the next, audit is the fundraisers audit.
That's always a good
This
one.
audit was conducted to review BBCPS's fundraising processes. The first objective was to benchmark BBCPS's regulations, which require employees to receive approval and complete fundraiser forms. We looked at 5 other divisions, and these are listed at the bottom of page 2. And then the results are listed at the top of page 3. Noting that VBCPS has similar policies as others. However, others have policies related to fundraisers outside of the division, and this will be discussed when we get to the findings. So we're going to have a recommendation related to that. Secondly, in the audit, we surveyed the principal, the student activities coordinator, and the bookkeeper at 6 schools at varying levels to determine if the fundraising procedures were being followed. All schools had practices in place to monitor internal fundraisers. However, only half of the schools received information on fundraisers from the external parent organizations as required by the business manual. Finally, we reviewed 2 common crowdfunding platforms to identify VBCPS activity within the 2 platforms. That first platform is Donors Choose, which is a platform that is allowed to be used by schools. It's designed to request funding to support the purchase of items to support the classroom. In doing this work, IA tested the controls of Donors Choose to ensure that a person could not fabricate a school or use a non-school address to receive items. And I'm happy to say that we were unable to do that. We identified a total of 37 schools with Donors Choose platform activity. 34 of those 37 did not have approved fundraiser forms for the project.
When you say 37 schools, you mean Virginia Beach City
Yes,
Schools?
Virginia Beach City Public Schools, yeah. And secondly, we looked at the GoFundMe platform, which is a platform that is prohibited because it is structured to raise money for a specific reason, and the money collected goes directly to a specified bank account, so that's why it's not allowed. We found 2 projects for BBCPS on GoFundMe. One project that was fully funded for $150, and that was to refurbish the furnishings in the staff lounge. And then another $2,000 project for after-school activities that had not been fully funded. The staff members for both of these projects were not aware that this type of fundraiser is prohibited. Neither of the principals at the 2 schools gave approval for the GoFundMe projects. So we have a total of 3 findings for this audit. And so if you turn to page 6, finding number 1 is related to the use of GoFundMe. We recommend that the Department of School Leadership reinforce the prohibited platforms with the principals. This was a collaborative effort, this fundraiser audit between the Department of School Leadership and the Department of Business Services, because they're involved in creating and maintaining the forms. We have a second finding, and this is related to donors choose. We're recommending that there be reinforcement to explain that donors choose requires the same approval as all other fundraising, requiring the forms and approval. And just to emphasize, one of the root causes of the forms and the approvals not being there is we found that some schools are using outdated fundraiser forms because the Office of Business Services added crowdfunding, which Donors Choose is considered crowdfunding to the form. So the updated form includes that, and we found that schools were using old forms. So we're recommending that the Department of School Leadership, through the principals and through the SACs, reinforce that the fundraising form needs to be used, the updated one, and that Donors Choose requires the same approval as any other fundraiser. We had another item noted that's also related to Donors Choose, and that's on page 9. So basically, when we were in the field doing the interviews, we got questions from principals and bookkeepers about what happens, and staff members, what happens with the inventory if a teacher that set up a project moved to another school or left the division. And it's very clearly stated in the business manual that the items, if assuming that they weren't consumables, that they need to remain at the school. So people are just not aware that that's the rule, but it's clearly stated in the business manual. So that was related to Donors Choose. And then the third finding, let's see, our final finding is on page 7. And it's for management to develop guidelines to support those in the business manual, requiring external parent organizations to identify their fundraisers. And the guidance should be reflected in policy. So right now, we have a rule in the business manual that says that external parent organizations have to turn in a budget, a fundraising plan, bylaws, for each of those organizations to the principal. But we learned in our work that that's not happening. So our recommendation is either you look at that requirement and you change it if people are really not going to be following it, or you strengthen that, which would be creating a policy. And this again would be kind of at the school board level, that would address requirements for fundraising, fundraisers that were sponsored by external parent orgs to be clearly identified. So we've seen problems with that, through other work that we've done. So again, that would be something that would, once management, and they have a good plan, because we've talked to the Department of School Leadership, to create that and to so that it will be followed and principals will get the information, because in the long run, they feel like it will be valuable for the principals to know what's happening in their schools.
Sweeps?
Karen, can you give me an example of an EPO, like at the elementary level, and then one at the high school level, maybe?
So at the elementary level, we pretty much see PTA and PTSA, and that is the one. We do have a school board policy related to PTA and PTSA.
Right, but that's not an EP. That's not an external, is it? Is that considered external?
It's external from us. We don't
Okay,
have oversight of their money, their activities. But the school board regulation regarding PTA and PTSA requires that the principal be involved. So that's
So
that's
we
in
already
policy.
have that covered.
Yes.
Okay.
I can't really give you an example at the elementary level for an external parent org. We see those more at the middle and high school level because they're typically around sports.
Okay, so would that be a sports booster club?
It would be like a
band boosters, all those
band
are
booster,
EPOs?
gridiron club.
Okay.
It seems like each high school has one central booster club, and then at the more active schools, each individual sport has their own group of parents booster club that supports the sport.
Okay.
One of the issues that we see with these external parent groups, PTSA, I'm familiar with their structure. They actually have a lot of treasury responsibilities that they have to follow within the organization. They have insurance, and also we're relatively comfortable with an organization like that that's an established organization, that there are structures in place. If you just started a booster club, and I did Cammie's booster club for the hockey team, unless I actually went through the process, get articles of incorporation, get myself registered as a nonprofit, and maintain articles of incorporation, file my taxes every year, I'm not a nonprofit. I'm not a group. I don't have insurance on there, and so a lot of these groups don't have insurance. So this has come up in many contexts. Ms. Woods and I, many times over the years, we'll get calls where a booster club decided they were going to purchase uniforms and then they didn't pay the bill, but they weren't us, they weren't our VBCPS, but all of a sudden they purchased them. We don't know where the money went. That's a concern for us. There's no insurance for it. We're not authorized to pay those bills, particularly because we didn't create this group, this booster group. One of the things I see a lot, and they're usually not school related, but you see kids like out begging on the streets for money with buckets. All I can think is, oh my gosh, can you imagine being a principal, kids wearing your school logo and they get hit by a car and you didn't even know they were out there. You didn't authorize that. We don't want to be in the business of running their groups, but at the same time, I think they need to say, hey, we're going to be out there. Because you may want to say, wait a minute, I don't need you running through a 6-lane or outside Lansdowne 12-lane highway trying to get money from people to do that. Plus, you also want to be careful how much money they're raising or how many times a year that they're doing events. Are you overtaxing it? We've seen situations where they're raising enormous amounts of money for uniforms or trips that may be excessive, and then you would be wanting to look at rules with those kids that can't afford those trips. How are you making sure that that's equally distributed? There are a lot of things that need to happen with these groups on there, so we don't want to take responsibility. I have been with other school divisions that do make those booster groups run their money through the school. I don't want us in that situation. At the same time, we need to be thinking about, what are the rules. So one of the things we talked about was a possibility of at least letting us know, what are your fundraising plans for the year? You don't want 12 different booster groups on Saturday running a fundraising event for your school, because that could be excessive on your parents. So we need to think through some of those issues on there. Also, liability. You want to say, listen, I don't need my football team jumping in and out of traffic. At that point, that's not a good choice for us. Or if you're going to do something that involves some other safety issues. I ran a dunking tank for an elementary school for 17 years. There are liability issues with dunking tanks. So you want to be able to say, that's not an approved activity for us. We don't want to do this. You also want to be able to say, when somebody said, Cammie's, booster club for this high school, and they come and they say, hey, I gave, Cammie $2,000 and my kid was supposed to go to camp. I arrived at camp and wasn't there. What happened to that money? And then I think our principal needs to be able to say, well, I'm not even aware of this booster club. We have no association with them. I'm sorry, I don't know who they are. That's another reason why we need to know at least who you are, so somebody would come to us, because somebody could just pose as a booster club and take the money.
Mm-hmm. And something that we've seen over the course of time is, with social media, as quickly as it moves, that there are a lot of fundraising advertisements on social media, and they don't always identify that the fundraiser is related to a booster club. So it looks like it's the school running the activity, but in reality it's the booster club. And so we've gotten inquiries like, oh gosh, there was a Cash App advertised, and that's not allowed. So I think it will be very important we value the activity and the support from external parent works, but I do think it creates a problem, especially at the middle and high schools, because there is so much activity. One of the things that when we were meeting with management to go over the recommendations for this audit, we were very impressed, because one of the things that's already happening at a couple of our high schools is the principals have taken action to try and fix that problem by creating a form to say, okay, and passing out the form to the external parent orgs to say, hey, you need to identify when you're doing a fundraiser. And that is being addressed kind of through the student activity coordinator, because they're kind of they have the pulse on what's happening with especially the athletics. And so the Department of School Leadership is going to take that information, and the plan is that they will push that out. And the timing is great, because we are wrapping up a school year, so we'll have time to fully initiate this for the next school year.
Yeah, I just had a quick question about finding number 2 with donor choose. How many platforms when during your audit did you see? How many platforms do we have that are similar to donor choose that are kind of like our authorized online platforms?
During this audit, we looked at just those two. I mean, that's a ever-changing question. Like at this point, those are the only two that we looked at because those are the only two that we're aware of. But as time passes, I know that, technology may allow other platforms. The one thing I will note is that when we were benchmarking our policies related to other schools, other school divisions, some other school divisions don't even allow donors choose. We do, but I feel comfortable with the process because we tested to make sure that someone couldn't change an address or create a fake school. I mean, there are actually people in Donors Choose in that organization that validate the school. We tried to set up an account and we pulled in one of our principals to help us to try and change the address. The principal was notified. So that platform is, they're really on it. And then when the items are received, so Donors Choose actually orders the items. So when the project is fully funded, they order the items and then they get shipped to the school. One of the requirements for Donors Choose is that you post pictures when your items come in. So we were seeing, evidence that the project was really funded and that the school really got the items.
Yeah, I'm just thinking at a high level, obviously that our constituents and parents want to be, good stewards and good community members and support financially the school and their kids' experiences. And I think that's an awesome thing. And I like everything that you said about kind of the safety avenue of what Donor Choose provides to those people. And so I guess, there's a higher level conversation around the board of like, I'm more of a proactive type person, right? Like if schools all created their own Donor Choose page, if that's a possibility ahead of time and that's communicated to their employees.
The way that it's currently set up is it's done by project. So
it's done by
an
project,
individual school, a teacher, what we were commonly seeing in the 37 that we saw, it was a teacher setting up a project to, for example, request funding for, a new chalkboard. That's a example, but they were instructional items. However, because the principals were not in the approval process, they didn't know that it was happening. So, one of the keystones of our internal control is that the principal has to approve all activity in the school. That's, specifically spending. And so, there may be a question of, are the items that are being requested appropriate? Do we want to be asking for snacks? So the principal does need to be in the loop of that process. But at this point, it is an individual can set it up. But there is a validation process because it does email the principal.
So in those cases of the 34 or 37 schools that did not have principal's approval, does that mean the principal got an email?
Well, they didn't know. They didn't know about the project. Now, whether at some point they got an email, I don't. I know that the principal, when we tested trying to change the address, that the principal got an email saying we were trying to change it. Now, I don't know if there wasn't a change, if the principal would have gotten an email. We weren't able to set up a fake school. It didn't allow it because there was a drop-down menu and it had all of our schools. So, but ultimately what should happen is the principal should use the same fundraiser form that any other fundraiser uses, and they should be completing that crowdfunding section.
Is that like a paper form or is it like an online form?
Currently it's paper.
Yeah, because I thought what you said was interesting when you said that there's forms with outdated information on it, and
Yes.
It seems like it's a very solvable problem.
And the thing is,
Yeah.
We have a section on our intranet where all forms are housed, and those are the updated forms. So if a person were following the protocol, which is to go to the intranet, to the forms tab, and pulling down the form that's there, then they would have been using the correct form. However, we know human nature. People tend to pull down a form, save it on their desktop, and then continue to use that form, and that's where we run into trouble. So if a person were following the, the recommended protocol, which is to use the intranet, it wouldn't have been a problem.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing.
So I gather that we leave it to the principal's discretion as to whether a particular fundraising initiative is appropriate or not. There's no written policies.
At this point, there is no written policy. It is site-based management, so that principal is the person who's able to approve or deny the fundraiser. Now, at the high school and middle school level, what happens is the fundraisers typically come in through the student activity coordinator, and they are kind of the screener of the fundraisers. And so they would approve the fundraiser before it would ever hit the principal's desk. So many times I think things get squelched by the student activities coordinator for reasons like Kimmy stated, that there was maybe an inappropriate, or risk management had stated that we can't use a dunk tank, or that you can't do a raffle, or, following specific rules. And that happens kind of on the front end with the student activity coordinator. But to answer your question, it's site-based management, so it's that principal that has the ability to approve the fundraiser.
So I don't know if this analogy is correct or not, but I envision a situation where we don't really have law. We just relying on a good sheriff.
I'm gonna remember that saying.
Yeah, that's a good.
Anything else, Larry? No. Okay, good. This is gone, right? Okay. I thought that was this is a really intriguing question, actually. Because what did we say? 30. On
37.
that page.
Yeah, 37.
34 schools had one set up without
Oh, yeah.
permission.
Yeah, 37, 34 were not approved.
Um,
We saw one division that does not allow fundraising at all. Oh, donors choose. Okay, so donors choose is not allowed.
Okay.
But I mean, that would be.
Site-based management.
That would,
That's
right,
fine.
site-based management, but that, I guess stems back to policy.
Okay. It seems to me that it's actually probably worth circling back and taking a look at some of those 34 and see if you can.
Oh, definitely.
You approached it from the standpoint of, can I make a fake one? And you couldn't. But somebody did make an unapproved one, and it would be useful, I think, to find out how and why, and whether we can close that gap.
Yeah, I think it's because the platform allows you to set it up without any approval,
Right.
so.
But again, Matt pointed out, and I think that's accurate, it was done without the principal's knowledge.
It's true.
Right, so that
Yeah.
was part of the safeguard that you did see work in the other scenario.
Right.
And I'm at least curious to know why it didn't work in this scenario.
Yeah, right now, our approval process is very manual. It's the form, it's the paper form. So there's a form at the beginning that gives the teacher sponsor the ability to start the fundraiser. It lays out the timeline of the fundraiser, like it's gonna last a week or 2 weeks. There's a start and end date. It gives details about what the proceeds are gonna be used for. And that's called the fundraiser anticipation form. And then at the end, the sponsor is supposed to reconcile the fundraiser. And to me, that's super important because it basically shows, okay, this is how much we brought in, this is how much we paid out, and this is our profit, which should line up with what's in the ledger. And if there are any, if things look out of sort, which the student activity coordinator would be looking at it, the bookkeeper would be looking at it, and the principal would be looking at it, it may raise some eyebrows if we were missing money.
Okay. I, for one, would like to see a sample audit of those 34 to see if we can determine how they were set up without permission. Does
Okay.
that sound useful to you? It certainly
Yeah,
does to
I mean,
me.
I think I do know the mechanics is because it's an online platform, so they go in and they set up the project, right? They say, I want to buy a new chalkboard. I put my school, identify my elementary school, and then it's out there. And the thing is, it doesn't get ordered until that money comes in. But there's no approval. Donors Choose does not require an approval. Donors Choose has the school name, and the
School
contact
address.
information, right? So when that money comes in, say $100 is received, Donors Choose orders the chalkboard and ships the chalkboard to the school.
To the school, so they're auditing, in other words, they're auditing, when you apply, you say, I am, Cox High School.
Right.
And you say the address for Cox High School is X. They go online and they go, yeah.
They're not validating that the person is a teacher at
But
the
they're
school.
validating that Cox High School is Cox High School and that they're going
Yes.
to mail a check to Cox High School.
They're gonna mail the goods, because remember, Donors Choose is not money, it's items.
Okay.
But now, as to the appropriateness of the item, that's where we really want the principal to be involved, because if they're buying items that, or things that are not necessary, or requesting items that are not necessary, or that the school's already providing, I mean, there could be a question of, the intent of the use of the items, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And you saw in the description, examples of some of the things that were being requested. We listed those in the report. If you look at the bottom of page 6, items requested by VBCPS teachers included instructional supplies, candy chips, snacks, printers, fans, and a walking pad. That's just a sample of what we saw. So again, it brings into the question of, are those snacks being used in the classroom, or are they going in the lunch boxes of their kids? So again, if the principal was approving that, they would be in the position to question that.
Okay. You follow?
Yeah, just a quick follow up. So maybe I misheard something. So when the schools are on Donor Choose,
Yes.
the principal gets no communication at all from the
No,
platform.
The only notification that the principal got in our example was when we tried to change the address. We tried
the
to
school?
we tried to
Okay.
change the address of one of our high schools to one of our personal addresses. And it sent that principal an email that said, do we need to change the address of XYZ High School? Mm-hmm. And so we were in communication with that principal, and the principal sent us the emails. There was no way for us to add a school because it's not an option.
Okay.
So those were the two things that we looked at as far as the internal controls for Donors Choose.
Okay. Thank you so much.
If you don't mind, I want to add something. Part of this audit, one of the deficits that we found is we train bookkeepers, we train principals, we train sponsors that deal with money. We don't train any teachers on anything about finance. So where some of the problems is, a teacher who has nothing to do with money just says, oh, I see GoFan, let's just go do it.
Right.
So meeting with school leadership, they mentioned that they have a bulletin that they send out at each school. And we are going to try to add a little blurb about finance, about don't do GoFan, Donors Choose as a fundraiser, must go through the principal, and like important things that we would never tell a teacher. So we are working on that to try to fix this problem.
Okay.
Just real quick, if I can follow up. Sorry.
It's okay. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I just wonder if there's actually a platform that we can have tighter control over, where we can achieve the outcomes of fundraising for a classroom where teachers have their projects and whatnot, but the school has stronger visibility into what's being requested. I don't know if there's a solution or.
I will tell you, you can also use the Virginia Beach Education Foundation, and we have approved an MOU with another fundraising organization. It only does for high schools. They came to us a year or so ago. The person who started it was a former graduate and wanted to be able to raise money for schools. Met with the Virginia Beach Education Foundation, and they're sort of supervising that particular MOU. So there is a platform that we've agreed to for high school purposes on there, but I think we would have to look at it for other groups. Whether some of the groups, like if you're doing PayPal or something like that, there are tax consequences too and other things you would need to manage. So we really have to spend some time determining what would be an appropriate platform that we could approve.
Yeah, I was just curious.
Yeah. Well, that's a great question though, because every time we talk about fundraisers and various things of the sort, we end up talking about some online platform because that's the way so much works now. And like you pointed out, it's easy for somebody just to set one up. Okay, well, for time being, at least, I withdraw that request to go back into this, because based on the two things you said, what I gather is, number one, the controls are sufficient to protect against fraud,
Yes.
okay? And number two, we're going to address the internal controls to try to make sure that principals are informed and they're part of the approval process so these things get approved. So I think that addresses the issue, at least for the time being, and we're obviously going to look at this is one of the things that we continuously look at, so.
Right, and we will follow up on all the recommendations to make sure that they're moving appropriately, and if, and we can certainly provide an update at some point to you if you're interested, but that's something that we do after the end of every audit, is we follow up. That's why we ask management to provide dates of implementation so that we can do timely follow-up.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna let this one go unless some, oh, go ahead.
So from a larger policy perspective, I see an issue with, do you want to keep them at arm's length, or do you want to embrace these groups more? Do you want to write rules on how they're going to operate, how they should be formed, what kind of organizational structure and organizational plans they should follow?
Ms. Woods and I have had endless conversations for a couple of years about it, and I think you're going to be hearing about it in something closed session. That'll give you a little bit more insight into why we have these concerns. I don't want us taking responsibility for an external group, but I also want us to make sure that we know who's out there and what they're raising. So it's a kind of a fine line, and I'm only because my kids went to Norfolk Public Schools, and they ran it differently in Norfolk. You ran their money through the principal at the school for the booster clubs. So I don't want that, because I don't want us responsible. We actually had a request in PRC from Mrs. Felton to provide guidance to these groups, how to organize, what they should be able to do. I don't want to become legal counsel to these groups. I don't want the liability for these groups. But I do think we can say, these are what we're expecting, and that we will, understand, who is out there on our behalf, at least, and, make some of those issues that we would. So if you were to come to the principal and say, I would like to start Cammie's Booster Club for this high school, I would say, these, it sounds like you don't really have an organization. I'm not going to be, supportive of that. I already have a group like that. So it's a kind of a fine line, but where we want to have some knowledge of what the groups are, what our expectations are, what our understanding of it is. There's other things you're not thinking about, like people are purchasing things. The principal said, no, you cannot have that item. It is not an approved item. A lot of times we have to have commercial grade things in the school. You go ahead and purchase that, you stick it in, it sets a fire over the weekend, you burn down the school. We were never supposed to have that piece of equipment in the school. It's not authorized. Or we said we were not approving our kids to go to this camp for the summer. You raised money, sent the kids to the camp, a kid gets hurt at camp for a group that we didn't approve. We need to have some rules about, why we do or don't approve some of these activities. So again, I don't want to be responsible. I don't want to provide them legal counsel for this. I don't want our insurance company having to take responsibility for misuse of funds. But at the same time, I think we need to have some policy explaining why we're concerned about it and what a principal should be looking for in approving these activities.
The one thing that I wanted to add to that is that if the external parent, or kind of piggybacking on your inferior quality comment, if the external parent org donates money to the school, then the school has to follow all of our rules for purchasing. And so that's where we have complete control, because, again, the principal has to approve anything that's purchased to the school. We have procurement guidelines in place and quality standards in place. So if, at some point, that could be something that could be discussed as far as, yes, we want your support, but we want your financial support, because then we are able to safeguard against that type of concern.
Anybody else? Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Ms. Whitson. That was a lot. All right. So we are now on to utility expense audit.
Okay, so this is the final report. This is the energy audit, and this was on the approved work plan for last year. We worked with an external vendor. The vendor's name is Troy and Banks, who performed this audit on a contingency basis. The audit was focusing on our two main utility vendors, who are Virginia Natural Gas and Dominion Virginia Energy. The audit used 3 years of data and was completed, again, on a contingency basis. The purpose of the audit was to identify irregularities in billing, and you'll see those, the laundry list of items that they looked at the top of page 2, all of the inconsistencies that they were looking for. And to identify opportunities to save money by looking at usage and alternate rate plans. Troy and Banks, the results of the work that they did, they identified 4 Dominion Virginia Power accounts and 1 Virginia Natural Gas account that could be closed, that had no activity. They also identified a handful of accounts with billing errors, as well as rate changes for 10 Dominion Virginia accounts and 2 Virginia Natural Gas accounts. What that boils down to in savings for us, to date, we've recognized a net savings of just under $2,000, and that's just from billing errors. And you'll see that that is listed at the top of page 3. Troy and Banks identified $962 worth of billing errors. When we submitted those billing errors to Dominion Power, they reran the accounts current, and they identified $2,200 worth of billing errors. Troy and Banks only charged us on the amount that they identified, which was the $962. So our net savings just from those overbillings, and you'll notice there were some underbillings, that's why there's a negative, was just under $2,000. Then they also identified the savings of closed accounts, and so you'll see those reflected under each heading. There are several for Dominion Power, and then there was one for Virginia Natural Gas. And then rate changes. So the total closure savings was $787,000. And the total estimated rate change savings will be just over $175,000. So what will happen from this point is that Troy and Banks will do a look back period. They still will have access to our records from Virginia Natural Gas and from Dominion Power. In 12 months, there'll be a look back to see, did we actually save the amount that they estimated? And then we will pay based on that savings. So if the projections are accurate, we will have an additional savings of $134,000 and some change. So in total, $136,000 of savings if the rate adjustments are productive.
Any questions?
I'm looking at page 2 real quick,
Yes,
and I just need you to recap that for me.
sure,
As there's
sure, absolutely.
start going through and just doing math,
Yeah.
and it might have
Okay,
missed something.
so
Just number 3, the audit results and the $170,000 at the bottom. Is this
Yes,
this
yeah.
okay?
yeah, I'm happy to recap
Yeah.
it for you. So this is the summary of the activity that they noted for Dominion Power. The first, the top, whatever, 7 or 10 rate changes are varying accounts at different schools, and I have the list. I can tell you where they are. And basically, we have the ability as a municipality to take advantage of some alternate rate schedules. A lot of those are around usage. So if we have high usage, we're able to get a bulk price. There's a lot of mechanics involved in that. So that's why they look at 3 years of activity to determine that. So the top, those top rate changes, they're varying between different rate schedules. Then at the bottom, those are the accounts that when Troy and Banks looked at our 3-year activity, there was no usage. So their recommendation, and we accepted that recommendation, was to close those accounts out. Do you have any questions on that before I move on?
What would be an example of no usage?
Oh, yeah. So The first one was the Green Run High School marquee. So the marquee apparently used to have power and now it doesn't. The second one is the Holland Road Annex school sign, which again, it's probably not being used. Basically, yeah,
I understand.
yeah. Scoreboards, that type of thing.
So the rate changes, we're able to negotiate rates, is what I'm hearing you say?
Yes, there are different rate schedules that we can take advantage of.
Okay.
Uh,
That resulted in
yeah,
that amount
for
of savings. Okay.
savings.
Okay.
So I can give you one example that's pretty easy to understand. If we have athletic fields, we're allowed to take advantage of a specific rate schedule, which makes the power cheaper. And we weren't on that for two different accounts. The Holland Road field and tennis courts and the Bayside High School ball field.
Okay.
So that's an easy one. The ones that are a little more complicated are the ones that are based on demand, because that's why that 12-month look back period is going to be important, because one of the things that was considered when they did the analysis was, have we made any improvements in any of these locations? Because that would then create efficiencies. So if we were looking at a building that had high demand, if we had just replaced the HVAC, maybe we wouldn't continue to have the high demand. So it was definitely a balancing act of, and also, did we have an extremely cold winter or an extremely hot summer? So, I mean, that's all that Troy and Banks does is utility analysis. We do also have on staff in maintenance services somebody who is managing the utility expenses, and he is very knowledgeable and was very involved in this work. And was very involved in the conversation between Dominion and Troy and Banks and internal audit. So it was fascinating to get this information. And then on the second, on the next page, page 3, the top of page 3, those are the credits. So those are, we either had Dominion Power, those were all related to Dominion Power. They initiated a new billing software a couple years ago, and they had some problems with it. So a lot of these were duplicate demands or estimated demands. You'll see that there are some negatives along with positives. The positives are in our favor, the negatives are in their favor. And so again, those that's what we've already been billed on. We've already recognized those savings because they've already credited us that, and we've already paid Troy and Banks.
That's great.
And the same thing for Dominion Power, which is the next section.
No, I really just wanted to really make sure I understood, because I mean, it's phenomenal to be able to save $170,000 and recover that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
versus-
So next February is when we will get the analysis from them, and we'll know what the real bottom line is.
That's awesome.
And then from that point, because they looked at 3 years of data, then it would be, because we're allowed to go back 3 years, it would be good for us to do this exercise again in 3 years.
Anybody else?
Today,
So schools have a certain amount of external lighting. Are they going through a meter, or is there a fixed fee for
No,
that?
they're going through a meter.
They're all going through a meter.
Now, not to be confused with city, there are city lights that the city
Yeah.
pays for
Okay.
and I think you're aware of that, in the vicinity of schools. So, but yes, most schools have multiple meters. They have a main, then the scoreboard has one, and then depending on the setup of the school, they may have a third one.
So all your site lighting that's a parking lot, back of the school building, whatever, goes through a meter?
It does.
Okay.
Any other questions on the utility audit? So this is savings, just to reiterate, of $178,995.81.
Projected.
Projected in
Projected.
future savings.
Projected. Right now, we've already realized just under 2,000 from credits. The other piece of that will be looked at on the 13th month, because the last rate change went into effect in January. So they'll do a look back, and we will review that. And we'll review it with our Dominion contact as well, and Virginia Natural Gas. So yes, that's correct. It's the projected.
It's a pretty significant
It is
projection.
significant. Yeah, it is.
Is there gonna be any follow-up here?
Yes.
After
yes,
that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they'll do the look back in February, and that's when it'll take some work to validate it, but excuse me. I will be able to update you, at the following meeting after that.
Okay. Second quarter next year.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, on to work in progress then.
Okay, let's see. For work in progress, all items listed under work in progress are on the approved work plan. I have the addition of the investigation 2691 that we added to the agenda at the beginning of the meeting. So that was new. And so we're working on that as well.
All right. Okay.
I mean, I think the plan looks great. I mean, this is some of the things that we talked about in previous committee meetings, and excited for some of the upcoming meetings to learn. And, we talked about the software utilization audit. That was something that I was
Yes.
kind of curious about, and, paying for things that aren't utilized or underutilized or duplicated. So I'm excited to see some of these results come in over time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I guess that means nothing further to add to that.
Item D?
Yeah.
I think we're on item D.
Yep.
The proposed audit committee meeting schedule, which you all should have in your packet. So what's reflected on this proposed schedule is the same setup that we had this year. We have incorporated, all of the school board and special meetings that have already been scheduled, and any holidays that are already on the approved calendar in this projected schedule. This follows the same pattern as the audit committee being the day following a school board meeting. And then we've kind of copied the schedule as it is now, which is starting at 1:15. But that's subject to what the audit committee is recommending.
Okay. All right. Yeah. From my perspective, I'm good with continuing the kind of the general format we have, which is what you've laid out here. Are there any conflicts people know of that want to change right now?
Could we meet at 1:30
Yeah.
instead of 1:15? Now that they're doing construction and they have that bridge, I get stuck at the bridge every time.
We can absolutely make that change.
1:30, is that okay with
Absolutely.
everybody?
Yes.
1:30. Thank you.
Good with me. Yeah, 1:15 is not a time. All right.
Okay.
Any other comments? Ms. Davenport?
So you'll send that,
We will, yes,
Okay.
we will finalize the schedule, we'll change the time, and then we'll send the appointments like we have in the past so that you can put them on the calendar. And we'll continue to use this meeting room because of it being broadcast unless the option comes up to have a different space. And we'll reflect that on the calendar.
All right.
Okay. The next item is the update from internal audit on the procurement of sole source contracts. As you'll remember, in January, we presented the audit report for the sole source contract audit. And at that time, you all asked for us to follow up. One of the items that we noted in that report was that we were able to trace sole sources, but some of the ones that we looked at were missing documentation. And so that was a concern that we recognized in the report. And so what we did was we started in May of 2025, which was picked up where our audit ended. and we traced all of the sole source contracts, sole source procurements from May 1st of 2025 to May 15th of this year, which was last week. I'm happy to report that we have backup for every sole source determination. There were a total of 18 in that time period. 16 of those were issued before our report was issued. The 2 that were issued after January, when our report came out, did include an expiration date, which was one of our other recommendations, was from the audit, was we saw sole source awards, but they didn't have an end date. And so that was one of our recommendations. So those 2 that were awarded following our report do in fact have that information.
Okay, this is a big one. Any questions? All right. Yeah, I appreciate you following up on the questions from the previous one. It's good to see that your recommendations are already being implemented.
They are.
All right. All right. The last item in D is updates from management for the capitalized asset audit from September.
And that's gonna.
I believe that will be me.
That's you. All right.
For the capitalization audit, based on the audit results, there have been several improvements and new processes that have been implemented to strengthen the capital asset management process. For starters, the asset management intranet site has been updated to reflect the current AssetWorks platform, also known as Recoup. Outdated instructions have been removed. New instructions on how to create disposals have been completed and uploaded to the intranet site. As part of an ongoing discussion focused on process improvements, a member of our team suggested that we do a PowerPoint training on the disposal process. So we are actually in the process of doing that as a little extra. And we're going to try to get that out there on the intranet site as soon as we have it completed. Our annual inventory process is currently underway. Elementary has been completed and the secondary is expected to be completed in July. And as part of our new processes, inventory results will be reconciled and reviewed by departments, or we will review them with departments. Departments will receive guidance on addressing the discrepancies and the importance of maintaining timely and accurate inventory. And follow-up will be conducted approximately 1 month after the initial meeting to ensure proper actions have been taken. And this is probably one of the most important things, the follow-up. Ensure we are keeping up with our inventory. We have also started conducting spot checks. We have already been to Great Neck Middle School. During the visit, we did find a inventory item that was disposed of, but it was still there. That was more of a timing issue. We did contact the department. It just hasn't been picked up yet. We will follow up to make sure that's been taken care of. We're going to do a spot check at Tallwood Elementary School next week. And based on the inventory results and where there might be discrepancies, we'll pick another school to spot check based on where we think we'll get the biggest bang for the buck. And as far as the capital asset management, it is a significant undertaking, and because many of these procedures are new, I don't want to underestimate how much time it's going to take to finish the inventory this year, to perform all the monitoring and the follow-up. But we should be done by December, but we will try to be done well before that. It just depends on how things work and if we get any hiccups. And then following our inventory completion, we will evaluate the process and get ready for the next inventory session. See what we can improve on. And that's where we stand.
I know capital inventory, A, is important, and B, is a pain in the neck. And I really think the only way around it is do what you're doing, it has to be done consistently, because otherwise, some piece of something gets stuck in a rafter somewhere, people forget where it is until they finally go to do an audit. They go, where are all these things? And people are like, well, I had no idea. It was 5 years ago last time I saw that thing. Or they never saw it. So Well, let me ask you here, in terms of how often, wall-to-wall capital asset inventory is being done. What are the key markers to make a full audit occur?
Do you say full audit?
Yeah, when would a place, and I don't know what subsection you're working with here exactly. Like, I mean, I'm sure we're not going to go to a school and do a full audit, but you might go to a cafeteria, for example. And do an
Well,
audit.
our
That's
department is just gonna do spot checks.
Yeah.
Just randomly, but we do inventories every year. We hire a contractor to come out and go in to every school and inventory every tagged item.
But the schools themselves aren't doing it on a regular
The
basis.
schools themselves are not doing it.
Okay, well, I guess that answers that question.
All right.
All right. Okay, I appreciate that. Any other questions? All right. All right, let's go over the 6-month schedule.
Okay, so the 6-month schedule, the only thing that's missing from this again is that 2691 investigation, which is in progress, so that would will be hitting June, so it's not reflected because that came up before this was produced. All other items listed on the 6-month schedule are on the approved work plan, and this schedule completes our work plan. So I'm very happy about that. Now, the one caveat is we still have the potential for investigations and change in bookkeeper, change in principal audit. So those are the unknowns. But our plan now has us finishing the work plan in time for the new plan to come out. So we're very happy about that.
Okay. Questions? I just wanted to remind you here. So when you start to develop 27, are you gonna do the same thing we did last time? As
Yes.
In terms of meeting
Yes,
individually?
that'll start in the fall, probably October, November timeframe.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. All right. Thank you. Now we are on to closed. I will now entertain a motion to recess into closed meeting pursuant to exemptions from open meetings allowed by section 2.2-3712 of the Code of Virginia, 1950 as amended for the following purposes. A1, personnel matters, discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific public officers, appointees, or employees of any public body, and evaluation of performance in departments or schools of public instruction or higher education, where such evaluation will necessarily involve discussion of the performance of specific individuals pursuant to section 2.2-3711A. Namely, to discuss investigation at 2 elementary schools and evaluation of a specific administrator and follow up on certain school activity fund audits.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. We are now closed.
Whereas the School Board Audit Committee has convened a closed session on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and whereas Section 2.2-3712D of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by this committee that such closed session was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now therefore be it resolved that the School Board Audit Committee hereby certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed session to which the certification applies. And only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed session were heard, discussed, or considered.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. We are in open session. And we are adjourned. Oh, sorry.
Just one item, the
Am I on?
next, the regular scheduled meeting, was listed as to be determined on the agenda. That's because of the adoption of the calendar. So that meeting would be on the 23rd of September at 1:30.
23rd September, 1:30.
Yes.
The next meeting. Yep, all right.
All right, thank you so
We're now
much.
adjourned.